is taking steps to prevent unrest on yet another front. All of this threatening to cast a dark cloud over the summer games. Beijing today saying it will pay farmers to produce more rice and wheat. It's trying to raise output in order to cool surging retail inflation that threatens to fuel popular unrest ahead of the Beijing Olympics. There are serious concerns about riots due to skyrocketing prices on rice. Meanwhile, in Tibet, China says it will not crack down on those monks who were interviewed by foreign journalists yesterday. They described abuses by Chinese authorities. You better believe Western sponsors of the games are watching all of this closely and wondering, do we proceed or do we pull out or do we scale back? Joining us now, MarketWatch.com reporter Bill Spain and Sharon Silber, NYC Coalition for Darfur co-founder. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Let's first of all start with the remote guest here, Bill here. You've been writing about this a lot. Do you think that some of these companies are going to feel pressured by the violence and may pull out?
Well, they're certainly feeling a lot of pressure from activist groups, but at this point it would be virtually impossible for them to pull out. I mean, they've invested tens of millions of dollars, a lot of time, a lot of prestige, and they're really kind of over a barrel because these companies also have enormous business interests in China, and the Chinese are very, very sensitive about any criticism of their policy, particularly around the Olympic Games. So I can't see them pulling out or even scaling back in any significant way.
You know, we sort of teased that by talking a little bit about the inflation movements that they're making over there. And I'll just note, by the way, that they were trying to keep prices low by forcefully setting the prices. Now they're raising prices to fight inflation. Not sure how I followed that logic. But the point being, how much of this is driven on a social side within China, and how much of it is sort of the pressure from the Western society?
Well, it's probably coming mostly from the outside at this point, but it's impossible to know because we have such limited information about what's going on inside of China. Most of the press tours that have been over there have been clearly very closely monitored. So I really can't say how much of it is internal and how much of it is external in terms of the pressure that's on the games. I would point out, however, though, that the Dalai Lama himself has said that he wants to see the Olympics go forward and doesn't want to see them disrupted.
Sharon, let's bring you into this conversation. Now, you know, the connection being that you're trying to get things moving in Darfur, trying to help the people there because the Chinese government supports Sudan's government and the rebels and so forth by providing arms in exchange for oil.
Right.
Now, a lot of people are saying, okay, well, what does this, have to do with the Olympics and like the situation in Tibet? You know, a lot of groups such as yours are pressuring China with the Olympics and pressuring these companies. Do you think it's going to make a difference?
Well, I think it already is making a bit of a difference. I think that our corporate sponsors are in a unique position to speak to the Chinese government, and the Chinese government is doing a lot of things that need speaking about, including their oil companies basically provide about 70% of the capital that's used for the genocide in Darfur. So that connection is very important.
You hit on a topic that we hit on here a lot, and that is the capital flow into these developing and especially war-torn areas like Darfur. And I always come back to, I want as many companies and as many countries going in there and doing as much business and putting as much capital in there, but then you're saying that you don't want capital flowing into Darfur. I say isolation begets more genocide.
We're not advocating isolation. There is a targeted divestment campaign, which is really geared
which gets
to
more companies out of Darfur. They made Rolls-Royce not care about Darfur because Rolls-Royce got out.
Right, but also some of these companies that are in there, for example, the Chinese companies, China plays an enormous role politically in terms of shielding Sudan in the Security Council. They have really been a cover for Sudan in many ways, and it's really not good to have a country where there are not shareholders that are responsive as Westerners are.
Bill, speaking of shareholders' responses, I mean, let's tie that back to the business side here. I mean, how are these corporate sponsors going to get active on the Darfur side of things? How vocal are they going to get about all of this?
If they think it can make them money, they'll get active. If they think that it'll lose them money, they won't. I mean, that's the bottom line here. They're responsible to their shareholders. And again, I cannot stress enough how these companies have enormous business interests in China, and they do not want those endangered. This is a market of 1 billion people. Olympic sponsors include companies like McDonald's, Coca-Cola, Anheuser-Busch, Johnson & Johnson, Procter & Gamble. They see this as an enormous market, and yet that government can also control their access to that market and will probably not hesitate to squeeze them if they start causing trouble over the Olympics.
And
Bill,
it
thank
has
you.
made a difference, I mean, because when you have the president of France saying that I need to talk to the EU to see if we should boycott the opening ceremony, Sharon, that's huge.
And the EU has divested from investments in Chinese oil companies, and I believe more and more governments and universities and states will continue
Right.
to
Oh,
divest.
I wish they would. I wish they would just
Thank you
get
both
more and
very
more involved.
much.
Thank you so much
Thank
for being
you.
here, guys. On Tap.